And we're back with episode 10 of Dog Football Weekly. It's your host, Reed, with the co host,
Russ.
and our special guest today is Athletic Director, Coach Champion. Coach Champion, can you tell us a little bit about how the middle school basketball season's going?
Well, we hopefully will end with a good flourish. I guess we start our tournament tomorrow against Mount DeSale, so we'll see.
Yes, sir. What's y'all's record?
I'm not sure what our record is, but we've won 3 out of the last 4, so we're
That's
peaking
good.
at the right time.
Yes, sir. You think we got a lot of young talent on that team?
Yep, definitely got a lot of up and coming talent. So
Yes,
hopefully they'll grow, and we'll see them become really good varsity players over the
yes,
year.
sir. Yes, sir. Well, how does it compare to last year's team?
I mean, last year's team was really talented too,
Yes,
and
sir.
hopefully these couple classes of talent will come up and make us a good varsity coming up.
Yes, sir. Well, today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit. Coach Champion, what's your thoughts on the Ra Thomas arrest?
Well, I guess that's probably what you run the risk of when you bring in transfers through the portal. I think that's one of the reasons why Kirby really hasn't gone to the portal a whole lot. A lot of times those guys are leaving for reasons, and I guess that's sort of the coach's job is to figure out why they're leaving. A lot of times guys get disgruntled with playing time or whatever to leave. Obviously, that wasn't the case with him. I think he would have been a good addition. I don't know how things are going to shake out internally there. I think he can help the receiver room for sure, just based off of what he did against Georgia mid-season.
Yes, sir.
But I don't know. I guess it's to be determined as to how that works out. I think a lot of it is he going to come in and conform, I guess, to the culture that's been built in Athens.
Well, it's a big change from being like wide receiver one on Mississippi State in that offense and coming to Georgia, and he'll be with Ladd, Brock Bowers, Dominic Lovett, and Arian Smith. They'll all be in the same wide receiver room. Rosemary Jack Saint.
Yeah,
I mean,
the receiver room should be pretty stacked, and it was really stacked until AD Mitchell transferred.
Yes,
but I think they were hitting the portal anticipating that was going to happen. And I heard a comment that was made by somebody a few weeks ago that it was really nice these guys that even if they were going to leave, they didn't make it public, so it was a distraction through the playoff run in the national championship.
Yes,
so I applaud him for that, and obviously, it sort of is the same thing as happened with Jermaine Burton the year before, and I think the recruiting has gone enough where okay, one guy leaves, just plug and play another guy. But I think the receiver room was probably the one place that really couldn't happen again, and it did. And I think that's why they had to hit the portal to get Ra and the guy from Missouri as well.
Yes, sir. And so next question is, how does it feel to be a lifelong Dog fan and see him win 2 back-to-back?
Very sweet, very sweet. I've told people I'm enjoying every second of it just because I've lived through the ups and the downs. I can remember sitting in what was left of a hurricane watching us play Alabama in Athens and losing like 45-7 or something. It was some bad score, and I just remember how miserable that was. So having lived all the ups and downs, now to be up and be there for so long now, which you say long, 2 years in college football world is a long time. It's nice, and we're gonna enjoy every minute of it as long as it can go. You just know that at some point it's gonna go down a little bit, but at the same time you hope it doesn't because it's been a long time coming.
Yes, and they've really a lot of people now are kind of wondering where it came from, but this team's been built up over the years with, Kirby's first year at 7-5, then year 2 was the Natty,
Yeah,
lost, and then I mean ever since then he was 11-3, 12-2, and then he had COVID year, and then Natty.
well, I mean, and a lot of it's been building with recruiting over the years. And I can go back to the Mark Richt era. There was a lot of talent there. It just seemed like we didn't have enough talent to get us over the top. I mean, I remember several years where we finished number 3 in the country. The year LSU won the national championship, everybody felt like Georgia should have been in that spot and could have won it that year. But I think one of the things I always thought that Mark Richt, the one thing that he fell short of recruiting was recruiting linemen.
Yes,
We had skilled people everywhere. I mean, you look through the league over the years. You go back to Matthew Stafford, Todd Gurley,
No
David Green, No Sean, all those guys. Tons of skill talent, but not a lot of linemen that came through. And I think that was sort of changed. I was one of those. I thought that losing Sam Pittman as offensive line coach was going to be huge when he left. That was when Kirby replaced him with Matt Luke. That was huge. And now with Stacy Searles, there hasn't been a beat miss there. And if you watch the recruiting, it's always 3 or 4 linemen in every class. Obviously the tragedy of losing Willock, I think, hurts. But I think Van Pran coming back is huge. I mean, I think that was a major get there when he probably could have gone to the draft and probably been drafted pretty high.
Yes, sir.
I mean, if I'm a GM, that's a guy I'm going to build an offensive line around. And obviously losing Willock is a tragedy, but it's also he played a lot of really good reps. I watched the other night some highlights of the national championship, and almost every highlight Willock was in there. So that's obviously a tragedy, but it's huge on the field as well. So,
yes, sir.
But there's also a bunch of guys there that can take it, can take his spot, and there are going to be some new faces and new numbers in there this year, but you really don't really expect them to miss a beat there.
Well, as of right now, they only have to replace McClendon, and they get back Ratledge, Truss, Amaris Mims, Van Pran. They'll have Erickson went.
Yeah.
And they'll have.
Well, they lost. I think to me, the big thing is they just lost some depth that they had there. Losing Broderick Jones, hurt, but he was also, he was injured for a while, and that's when a Mims stepped right in. McClendon missed a little time. Mims stepped in. Truss missed some time. Warren Erickson, and people don't remember, Warren Erickson started in the national championship game 2 years ago and then was sort of relegated to a backup role and just provided a ton of depth that they had. And a lot of the teams in the league just don't have that.
Yeah, well, one more question I have for you is, who do you think the quarterback will be next year?
I don't know. But I think either of the 3 would be perfectly fine. I don't think any of them will miss a beat. I think Carson Beck will probably get the first nod just because he's the older guy in the room. But I think Vandergriff has got a lot of raw talent. I think one of the knocks on him was he played in a small school, but kid's got a ton of arm talent. I've heard a lot of people compare his arm strength to Stafford and some of those, and even I've heard that from about Beck too. I don't think you can go wrong. I think that Gunnar Stockton probably has some of the intangibles that Stetson Bennett had, and truth be known, I think that all 3 of those guys may have been a little bit more talented than Stetson Bennett, but Stetson had his guys.
Yeah.
They were going to play for him, and it was to the point where the coaches couldn't take him out of that spot. He earned it, obviously, and the underdog role or whatever you play. He did it right, and he's got 2 national championship rings. And I saw a thing yesterday that said projected that he could even get drafted in the third round, which nobody even dreamed that he'd even be playing at Georgia 2 years ago, much less be a third round kind of guy. So I don't know. I don't think you can go wrong with either of the 3. Your fear is that after spring, one of those guys is going to jump into the portal. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think those guys are pretty happy there. I think, they've realized that Georgia's at a point where you got to wait your turn. When you get your opportunity, you take it. Now, that's easier for me to say than those guys having to wait their turn. And I know, obviously, they want to play, but I think any of the 3 would be fine. But I do think Carson Beck gets the first chance.
I think keeping Todd Modkin, keeping him, because there's been a lot of rumors circulating about him leaving for the Bucs job. which that's really kind of settled down in this last week. But I think keeping him
Got to be
that'll
priority
be
number
huge.
one. Yeah,
That's priority number one. I think if you, as long as you have him, whoever you put back there is, I don't think they're going to have a Stetson Bennett season, but I think they'll be just fine in the offense.
Well, and if you look at the schedule for next year, there's a lot of games early where quarterbacks can learn and grow before it really gets into the meat of the schedule, and really the schedule is really bottom heavy, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, I've heard coaches talk about, you know, wanting to play a marquee game early in the year to keep guys motivated during the preseason. But I think this is probably one of those years where you need a few of the lesser games, I guess, to get those guys comfortable and to figure out what you got. I mean, they obviously knew what they had coming into this season. He wasn't going to get unseated, so they got to figure that out. And there's a lot of games early that the Georgia fans really don't want to be played, but I think they're going to need those this year. You know, and you look at, and then the scheduling after that goes right back to the same. Now, part of that was, you know, they lost Oklahoma off of the schedule this coming year because of the shift in the conference, and the conference actually made them cancel that game because of all the contract issues they have moving forward, because the return trip was supposed to be after Oklahoma comes into the conference. So it'll be interesting to see how this year plays out. Georgia's going to be like Clemson has been, where everybody knocks their schedule, and they almost are going to have to be perfect running the season to have a chance.
They'll have to. Their projected win total is 11.5.
Yeah, well,
that's a 12-win.
Well,
season.
I mean, you look at the bottom of the schedule. And I forget exactly what it is, but I know you got right there toward the tail end of the season. Obviously, you got Florida. Tennessee has been moved to later in the season, where, you know, an old guy like me remembers when Georgia opened the conference schedule with Tennessee. So that one's been moved later in the year. So I think the gauntlet is sort of, and Ole Miss, I think, is toward the end of the season next year. But really and truly, there's a lot of games early in the year where hopefully whoever the guy is can learn and get acclimated to the offense. And you got to feel real good if Monken stays, which, you know, that's what everybody's saying right now. You know, that's huge for all those quarterbacks in the room and for the offense. Plus, the reality is the quarterback, all they have to do is manage the game. You know, I mean, if the defense gets better like everybody thinks they will, just don't put the defense in bad positions. Score points, but don't put defense in bad positions. And I think that's how Stetson grew over the years, is they were really conservative with him, first championship year, because the defense was so good. You knew they weren't giving up more than 10 or 14 points. Just do enough to win us ball games. And that's probably going to be the mentality, at least early in the season. And I think as Stetson Bennett grew, they opened up the offense more for him.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting to see. And that defense, obviously last year everybody thought this defense is going to take a big step back and become more kind of, middle of the pack in the conference. But that defense was they still had a great defense last year.
Still pretty daggum good.
Yes, sir.
I mean, the anomaly was the Tennessee game where we gave up a bunch of points, and then obviously Ohio State at the end of the year. But those were two really good offensive teams.
Yes, sir.
I mean, but I don't know the exact totals, but you take those two out, and it's very few points given up and very few yards, truth be known.
And you see guys like Michael Williams, he was sophomore, Marvin Jones Jr., he'll be a sophomore, Bear Alexander.
Well, that's the recruiting end of it, is there's always guys to take your spot. Dumas Johnson in the middle. I mean, the middle linebacker, everybody thought there's no way we can replace Nakobe Dean, and he did a heck of a job this year.
Stepped right in.
And there, you look, I think losing Jalen Carter hurts, because he, the coaches had to scheme up for him for sure. But you got Bear Alexander that can take his spot. And you got those guys on the edge that toward the tail end of the year, they were playing like juniors and seniors, even though they were freshmen. So,
Mm-hmm.
they've got a chance to be that much better, even though they are losing some talent off of the defense. But I think the defense should be improved.
I think so too, and I think the defensive line gets better. I think because you bring back Zion Logue, McClendon, or no, I mean Warren Brinson, he's
yeah.
back, and there's one more I'm forgetting that's coming back. There's three guys right there, and they've rotated for the past 2 seasons
Yep.
playing on that line.
Well, and that's the beauty of playing as many people as Georgia plays is if you play that many guys, some of them have to be younger and they're getting the experience that they need. I mean, and if you're playing in national championship games, okay, playing in regular season games is easy. And then when you see some of those guys, especially at the end of the year, playing really well against the Ohio States of the world, you feel pretty confident in what you're doing. And then they're bringing in, all of these other guys, and not all of them pan out, obviously, but a lot of them have, and that's why I think recruiting is such a big deal to Kirby. He said it many times. That's the lifeblood of the program.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Dog Football Weekly. Thank you for joining us, Coach Champion.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for having me.
You want to give us our sponsor, Russ?
Today's sponsor is Valley Boys Honey. Go get your honey and T-shirts, and we'll see you on the next episode.